In today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about improving your guitar solos because I feel like as guitarists, it's really easy to fall into this habit of practicing scales. And while scales are really, really wonderful, and I love scales and I practice scales regularly, I think that a lot of the time when it comes to soloing, a lot of intermediate guitarists tend to kind of default a lot on scales. Or if it's time to improvise something, they might literally just run the scale in order because that's all they've practiced doing. And I wanted to share with you guys a nice tip to improve your solos and use these simple tools that the pros use to kind of get better results and play more interesting solos. So I think the secret antidote to playing boring scale lines is that we actually play arpeggios instead, or we mix arpeggios with scale lines, because again, scales are awesome, but they need other things in them, not only scales. Kind of like I really like pasta, but I would never eat just cooked pasta. I need some sauce or something, right? So arpeggios are a lot more compelling when making melodies than scales are, just because you get wider intervals. And what I mean by that is in a scale, say I was playing a G major scale, all of these notes are moving in what we would call stepwise motion, which means they're all either a whole step or a half step from each other. So they're very close. Which is awesome for building guitar technique, and it sounds nice, you know, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But when we're actually making melodies, it's very, very rare that we would have things moving purely stepwise because it gets fatiguing on the ear and it's really predictable and not very musical. So for example, would you rather listen to something that went like this? Or would you rather listen to this melody? That last one that moved around a lot more was more exciting because it used these wider intervals. So again, while scales are wonderful for technique and they can be super awesome, we need to break them up with some other stuff. So arpeggios is one of the most potent things that you can mix into your solos. And they really possess, the thing that's beautiful about arpeggios is if I'm playing over a G major chord, or say this one, and I play a G major arpeggio, so G, B, D, G, B, D, G, those three notes, I'm being as laser specific as possible, and I also get these beautiful wide intervals of, which is way more interesting than that last one. I actually threw in a bit of an arpeggio, but it makes it a lot more interesting and a lot less fatiguing on the listener's ear. So one thing that's really, really great to do when you're working on this is, say you have a song where your chords are G, C, D, and then maybe it goes back to G. If that's kind of your chord progression that you're dealing with, it's a really, really awesome idea to just play. So it's a bar of G, a bar of C, a bar of D, and then a bar of G. That's my kind of four bar loop. If I wanted to play over that, you could practice this idea of playing first only arpeggios, so and I would do eighth notes when I'm doing this, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. There I switched to C, so here's my G. Then I want to play a C arpeggio. Then I want to play a D. Then I'm back at G. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then once you get kind of comfortable with where these notes actually are, and again, I'm only using these kind of four positions that overlap. I do have videos on everything you need to know about the major triads on this channel, and I have free diagrams for all of them available to download on my website, so I encourage you to check those out if you aren't familiar with your arpeggio shapes. But there, I'm only using a small portion of the neck. Obviously, once I get comfortable in this position, I could move it up to this being my G, this being my C, and this being my D. That was kind of... You can move them all the way up the neck, and that's great, but right now we're just kind of focused in this area. And a really good thing to do is mess around first with only playing arpeggios. I think restricting your practice is always a really good thing. So say I'm improvising over this. arpeggios and trying to make ideas out of it, right? So then you could do the same thing, say, in the next position once you get comfortable. I could go... And you're making these kind of melodies with these wider gaps and only using these triad arpeggios. Now, if you want to take it kind of to the next step, the wonderful thing about arpeggios is that all 5 positions of the arpeggios on the guitar will sit within their positions for either the major scale, the full diatonic major scale, or the pentatonic scale. And what you can do with these is you can mix the two of them together now. Because again, scales are good, but if you're only playing scales and you're only playing things in stepwise motion, you're going to get boring really, really quick. So say, for example, we were playing over that same chord progression. G, C, D, back to G. I'm going to play G major arpeggios, and I'll think major pentatonic. Again, I have a video on major pentatonic scales as well if you want to check those out. Download those diagrams for free on my website. But if I was doing the same thing in G major, so I got G major, over the G chord I'm playing a G major pentatonic scale and the G major triad arpeggio. Over C, I'm thinking C major pentatonic, which in this case would be the 4th position. And that 4th arpeggio. For D, I'm playing a 3rd position arpeggio and pentatonic scale, and then over G it's the same deal. So here's the progression to get it in your ears. And so there, I'm blending, and I threw in a major 7 chord as my ender G there. But I'm using these arpeggios and these pentatonic boxes, and it helps me kind of break out of the monotony of if I was just playing scales and I was keeping it mostly stepwise. It would sound like this, and it'll be less interesting. But so here's me just playing stepwise scales over this. Then that got away from me at the end. I'll do that one more time. You know, so it just adds in a lot more interesting melodies, and in those arpeggios it contains all of the harmonic information of what's happening with me only playing single notes rather than chords. So this is just a really common mistake I see intermediate guitarists making when they start, you know, trying to improvise and trying to come up with cool solos. I just threw my pick on the floor. But it's a really, really common problem that I see where we just run scales in these stepwise motion and it doesn't sound very musical, and then we get frustrated and feel like we can't solo, and it's a whole thing. So there's something that I'd love for you to think more about, incorporating some arpeggios into your playing and kind of branching out from just playing scales. I think is a really, really wonderful thing. And beyond this idea of making it more musical and having these more interesting, wider intervals, you also get the added benefit of improving your technique, because these arpeggios give you some more complicated left hand and right hand problems to deal with than if you were just running scales, because there's more notes, it kind of smooths out the gaps, whereas when you do arpeggios you have to do a lot of string skipping and you have to figure out some fine tuning of your left hand technique. But anyways, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. If you want, you can take a guitar lesson with me. I have a link to the contact page on my website down below. I work with all genres and levels of students, and I'd absolutely love to sit down with you and help you on whatever's troubling you on the guitar. And last but not least, I have a video coming out every Monday and Thursday, so I'd love to see you in the next one. And until that time comes, I'll wish you a wonderful day, and I hope you have some fun playing the guitar.